Welcome back, everyone. The Canadian women's soccer team boasts an Olympic gold medal, 2 bronze medals, and the world's all-time leading goal scorer, Christine Sinclair. Yeah! Exactly. But recently, the team has been in the headlines for a different reason.
Players are calling for transparency and equity, recently taking the issue straight to Parliament Hill. Here to update us on this developing situation is TSN's senior correspondent, Rick Westhead. Thanks for being here. Glad to have you.
Rick, we want to dive right in. There's a lot to get to, but the big issue, perhaps the main ask of the women's national team, is pay equity with the men's team. And considering that this is a taxpayer-funded organization, and then therefore kind of impacts all of us, we should all care to a degree, what does this pay disparity right now actually look like?
Well, first, it's great. Thanks for having me on. It's great to talk in front of a live audience about an issue that should be important to every Canadian. Pay equity in this case looks like Christine Sinclair said it better than I could. She went on Twitter last month and she pointed out that in 2020 and in 2021, Canada Soccer had spent roughly double on the men's program what it had on the national women's team program. At the same time, there's a lot of reason for optimism. FIFA, the international agency that operates soccer, announced recently that the prize money for the Women's World Cup this year will be $150 million. Last time there was a Women's World Cup in 2019, the prize money was $30 million.
Wow.
So there are gains being made.
Wow.
Okay, but it's not just pay equity. The players are asking for equity in other areas like resources and support. So can you give us some examples of the inequities in these areas?
Yeah,
what areas?
for sure. So last month, the women's national team played in a tournament called the She Believes Cup in the United States. They went down for a training camp in Florida first. And at that training camp, they had the money to bring 20 players into camp. That number is important. Soccer is an 11-on-11 sport.
That's right.
And so you need 22 players to have full practices with teams. They didn't have enough. The men's team has more than 22 players at its camp. We also saw some issues with resources like physiotherapists and massage therapists. So, one of the players on the women's national team, Quinn, recently was one of 4 players who testified in Ottawa about this issue. And Quinn said that this shortfall of resources means that players kind of have to choose, well, if we have problems, we need to go in and see physio. Which of our problems are we going to ask to have dealt with, as opposed to all of them?
And transportation is also an issue, right? How they travel, I guess? Or...
Yeah, there's been an issue, again, with the men's team traveling business class, while women's team players have traveled economy class. Janine Becky, one of the players on the women's national team, she told me that there was a camp in Vancouver before a Canadian game against Jamaica, and she flew back from Europe for that and did a double connection economy class. I don't know of any of the men's team players that have had to do that.
Double connection economy.
Just let that sink in for a minute. So a lot of the demands made came down to a call for transparency, as we mentioned off the top. The players want Canada Soccer to open the book so everybody knows. What questions specifically do they want answered?
I don't know all of them because I'm not in these negotiating sessions, but I know they're asking questions about what do the sponsorship contracts and media rights contracts look like? When we have a national team game in Canada, how much money are we making from ticket sales? Things like this.
Yeah.
I want to dive into this a little bit more because I've been listening reading all of your reporting. You've been doing a lot of podcasts about this, and this is the part that I found really interesting. Sponsorship deals. I think on average, any Canadian sees these brands and the partnerships and the deals that specific players, for example, are making with companies. And we think, okay, everyone's getting their cut out of these deals and everyone should be getting paid and getting paid appropriately. But it turns out it's not actually happening that way. Can you break it down for us? What's actually happening on the business end when we see these?
How much time do we have here?
Yeah.
I mean, we have to go back a little bit in time to roughly 2017. And at the time, Canada Soccer and the people who run that organization wanted to put together a bid to host the 2026 Men's World Cup. There's one problem. FIFA says that you have to have a domestic professional men's league in your country to actually host the World Cup. So they started talking with investors in this prospective league. And what the arrangement that they wound up with was that the investors of this new league, the Canadian Premier League, would give Canada Soccer a guaranteed payment of between $3 and $4 million a year for upwards of 20 years. In exchange, the company and the private league, trying to keep this as simple as I can, would get all of the sponsorship money that Canada Soccer raised. So what that means is that when the Canadian women go win gold at the Olympics, as they just did in Tokyo, then the companies say, we're so proud to partner with Canada Soccer and support this program. The reality is that the money that's raised through those sponsorships are all going to this professional men's league.
And not to the women.
Right.
Okay, so there's another issue. There have been budget cuts recently, which exacerbate the inequities. And some people are saying that because of these budget cuts, there's not enough money to go around to meet these demands. Is that fair to say?
Not for me to say, honestly. Like we know, and I know from talking to players on the women's national team, they are again and again and again asking for transparency. So to me, it's not for us to say, hey, is that fair or not? They have leverage. They can choose to play or not to play. And we saw before the She Believes Cup that the players said that they were going to go on strike and not play, and they wore these shirts that say enough is enough. They're using their voices right now, demanding changes, demanding that their working conditions be improved. And at some point, the sponsors of Canada Soccer and this private league that we just talked about, at some point, these companies are going to, CIBC and Allstate and Nike, they're going to say, listen, we didn't get into this deal to be brought into controversy. You got to fix this, or we're going to walk away.
Yeah, I want to hop on what you're just talking about right now, because when the men's national team refused to play a friendly match against Panama last year, they were permitted. They were permitted to say, okay, we're going to play this. We're against this. We're not doing it. But when the women's team, as you mentioned, wanted to go on strike, Canada's soccer threatened to sue them individually for millions of dollars if they refused to play. That's why they wore those Enough for Enough jerseys in protest. What is their recourse at this point, or is there any recourse?
Well, I guess, again, their recourse is not to play or to use the public voices that they now have that people are absolutely listening to call for change. We know that companies, when there is this public rallying cry, respond. We saw it last year with Hockey Canada, right? How many people across Canada said, no more, enough, we have to fix this. And one by one, the sponsors of Hockey Canada said, you have to change or we're going to leave. And some of them paused their sponsorships of Hockey Canada. In a way, this isn't a lot different.
Interesting.
There's a common refrain out there where people are saying, this is not new. It's been going on for a long time. So why now? Why are the players coming forward now? How would you answer that question?
Women's sports is an amazing thing right now. Like I'm spending more time than ever looking at this and trying to find ways to report on it. And if you look, and I just brought this because I didn't want to get my numbers wrong, but here's a couple facts. Right now, the University of South Carolina women's basketball team is drawing 19,000 fans a game. That's more than all but 19 of the top Division I men's teams in America.
Wow.
The Seattle... I'm not used to applause when I do TV, but I could get used to it. Seattle's WNBA team, they just sold a series of minority shares that value that team at $150 million. We're also seeing a new professional women's league in Canada that's going to start, Project 8, it's going to start in 2025. So there's a ton that's happening in this space of women's professional sports, right? And so, again, against that backdrop, you have this women's team, which is saying, we don't want to be taken for granted. And if you talk to them, Janine Becky and Sinclair, Christine Sinclair, Sophie Schmidt and Quinn, they would say, we're not just doing this for us, we're doing it for future generations of players because this has got to be changed.
Well, your reporting is helping push this along. Rick, what a pleasure to have you here. Thank you for all the work that you're doing in this space. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks for watching. We've got lots more discussion and debates on everything from food and fashion to pop culture and current events. Don't forget to click like and subscribe.